Hello Pizza Warriors, I'm Mr. Spork and these are Mr. Spork's hands. I am sick to death of seeing people loading in dozens and dozens of frozen pizzas into their shopping trolleys at the market. It drives me crazy because I know those don't taste very good. I have never once had a frozen pizza, even a premium frozen pizza, that tasted better than my absolute worst homemade pizza. So, of course, everybody's going to throw up the argument, hey, but what about convenience, Mr. Spork? I can just pull it out of the freezer, throw it in the oven, and half an hour later I've got hot piping pizza. Well, no, you've got a hot piping cardboard disc that tastes terrible. I'm going to prove to you exactly how easy it is to make this stuff. I'm going to make dough, sauce, and assemble one on a timer so you can see how quickly it goes. We got to make pizza dough first, and that's where we're going to start. I'm just taking good all-purpose flour. I'm lucky to have fairly high protein Canadian flour. Notice that I didn't really measure, I just dumped in some. It's about 2 cups, but you know, you can use as little or as much as you want because of the way I make it. I've got 2 cups of warm water. I'm putting in 3 teaspoons of salt. You're saying that's way too much salt. Well, it is if I was going to use the whole thing, but I'm not going to need this whole cup, 2 cups I should say, of warm water. I'm just stirring to dissolve. The flour will take up exactly however much water it wants. Then I need some yeast. This is instant yeast, so you don't have to bloom it. I'm going to use 1 teaspoon in my dough. That's all that goes in there. And I want to get just a little tiny bit of vegetable oil in there, just a tablespoon or so. On goes the top. We start the blender, or the food processor, I should say. And then I'm going to pour in the water just until the dough ball forms. There we go. Perfect. It's done. That's it. You are ready to go. All you got to do is take this dough out, put it into a metal bowl for rising in the fridge, or you're going to put in a little bit of oil and rub it around. I'm going to pull my dough ball out here. It's a little bit wet. That's okay, because as the liquid from our blending gets absorbed, the flour is going to hydrate perfectly. We are done. Put on a little bit of plastic wrap. This goes into the fridge overnight and up to 3 days in advance. Go ahead and make a batch of dough, stuff it in the fridge. You're good to go after 24 hours of rising. Of course, you're going to need some sauce, and people are going to ask, hey, Mr. Spork, don't you have to spend hours and hours cooking down tomatoes if you want to make tomato sauce from scratch? Absolutely not in the context of pizza, because if you're cooking pizzas at a high heat like you're supposed to get good crust, the tomatoes cook on the pizza. In fact, most tomato sauces in pizza restaurants are a little more than canned tomatoes with just a few additions, and that's what I'm going to do is make a few additions. I did take the time, though. This is a 796 ml, 28 ounce can of tomatoes. I drained it into 2 different halves to show you that sometimes you're going to want to drain out a little extra liquid, sometimes you're not. If you want a thicker sauce, take your fingers and hold it over the can and drain some of the juice away. Don't throw that juice away, please. Use it for something like beans or soup or what have you. But the thicker tomatoes are what I'm going to use here. I'm just going to make a half batch. Also, you're going to need to add some additions to kind of balance out the flavor of the tomatoes. A little bit of oregano, a little bit of garlic. I buy no salt tomatoes, so I'm going to need a little bit of salt, and you're going to want a little bit of acid, so I just use a tiny little bit of lemon juice. Yes, I would normally use fresh lemons, but I just want to show people that you can make this with the bottled stuff too. And occasionally, depending on your brand, you're going to want a little tiny bit of sugar in there as well. But that's all down to personal preference. Taste as you go and decide for yourself. So let's make some sauce. First, I need a little bit of garlic. I do fresh garlic. I don't buy the pre-minced stuff. I'm not going to complain if you buy the pre-minced stuff, but you know, come on. Taste it and decide for yourself. So a little bit of garlic in there. Quick whir just to blend it down. In go the tomatoes. I'm going to put in, let's call it 1.5 teaspoons of oregano. I'm going to do probably half a teaspoon of salt. I'm not going to bother with sugar in this batch because they were sweet enough. And just a quick little jolt of lemon for the acidity. Boom. That is your pizza sauce done. Make this when you're making the dough, throw it in the fridge, and by the time the dough is ready, this will be ready to go onto your pizza. With the dough and sauce working, we've got to turn our attention to toppings. Everybody can figure out toppings for themselves, I think. If you want to go old school with mozzarella and pepperoni and that's it, That's great. But you know, one of the beautiful things about doing your own pizzas is that you can get crazy combinations that they'd never put into a frozen box, sometimes combinations that even the restaurants don't even think about. Today, I'm going to do a good old-fashioned mozzarella, but I'm also going to go a little crazy with some capers, a little bit of sweet onions, some red chili flakes, and a little bit of sun-dried tomatoes. If you want to go and smoke a sausage and make it a little bit more meat-happy, that's great too. If you are going to use a cooked sausage, cook it beforehand and then chill it all the way, or of course you can buy it pre-cured. Always buy the bigger chunks. That goes for your meats as well as your cheeses, because quite honestly they're 25, 30, 40% cheaper, and it doesn't take much to process them. If you can work a knife and you can work one of these, you can process your own. So let's start that timer again to be fair on our prep. This is just whole milk mozzarella. I've used buffalo mozzarella, I use Parmesan, I use feta. Just, you know, I'm a bit of a cheese addict if I'm honest, and anything really works, but always get at least a little bit of melting cheese on there, especially if you're going to use something like the feta on top of it, because that feta isn't going to melt quite as much. One of the best Mediterranean pizzas I've ever had, the one that my mom likes too, was from a company out west called Spiro's, and they made a Mediterranean pizza that was artichoke hearts and feta and sun-dried tomatoes, and just absolutely fabulous pizza. That's a good combo. But there you go. That's how fast it is to save 20 or 30% on your cheese budget. Just grate it yourself. It's not that hard. We got to get a little bit of this onion sliced. I'm using sweet onion here, but really any onion you've got will work. Because we're going to cook it at really high heat, they will cook on the pizza. If you want to take the time to caramelize them and use those, I think that's about all the onion I need there. Then go ahead and do that separately in a pan. Again, just play around with the flavor combinations. This sun-dried tomato, I buy them dry and then soak them a little bit. Just soak them in hot water for, oh, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes, and they rehydrate right back up. Chop this down fine. I think those are quite a few toppings with some of these capers on there. I'm going to leave the sausage out this time, but again, what, another 15 seconds to slice that if you want. And of course, I'm not going to wade into this debate, but you know, that's all I'm going to say. It's your choice. I'm not going to take sides in that fight. All right, so there we go. That's toppings done and ready. Okay, it's time for the fun stuff. Let's assemble this pizza. I've just pulled this dough out of the fridge. You can see it's risen a little bit. It's not going to double in size like bread, but it is too cold to really work into the final shape right now. But we can get it started at least. It's going to be a little bit wet, and in fact, if you want to use a little bit of oil or just a tiny touch of flour, try not to work in too much extra flour there, but you certainly don't want it to be troublesome to work with. So just a little bit here and there is going to give you that texture you need. I'm just going to start it. I'm using my knuckles here. Some people like to do it in a big pile of flour with their fingertips. It's really kind of personal preference. I'm not going to try to go too far, again, because the dough is too cold, but that's going to sit there for, oh, I don't know, 10 minutes in the summer, 30 or 40 minutes in the winter, just so it gets up to temperature and we can really work it out. Gives me a chance to talk about how we're going to cook this. Inside in your oven, you're going to crank the oven as high as you possibly can. You can go up to 500, 550 degrees if possible. If you've got a pizza stone, that's great. I've talked about all these other things. I've talked about using your trusty old pizza peel, coating it with a little bit of cornmeal and going that route inside. I've talked about all the kinds of pans because I've tried them all. I've talked about these perforated pans and how they sometimes work and sometimes fail miserably. No-stick pans, not a good idea for pizzas because the no-stick isn't very good at the high temperatures we want. But my preferred indoor method is to use a plain old ordinary sheet pan. This is what they look like new. After 1,000 pizzas, they look like this. Beautifully seasoned, almost automatically nonstick. This is my dedicated pizza pan. Yours can get like this too with a lot of practice. I've even talked about using cast iron. I've made a deep dish pizza using the cast iron skillet. That's a fabulous approach if you want to do something like a Chicago style. But today, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the cheap beginner's option because I don't want you guys to fail straight out of the gate here. The first thing that you want to avoid is a pizza crash and burn, shall we say. So I'm going to put mine just on a plain old piece of parchment cut to size. I'll do that as soon as this dough just warms up a little bit more. Okay, this dough's had some time to warm up, so it's ready to stretch out to the final size. You can pick it up, you can leave it on the bench, whatever works best for you. I'm just using my knuckles, going around the thicker outer edge to stretch out the bigger center. You don't want to put it on your parchment paper too soon because the dough does still have moisture and that parchment paper would go a little soggy on you. But that is a pretty good finished size. If it's, again, fighting with you a little too much, just basically walk away from the dough for 5 minutes and it will calm down considerably. If I can avoid messing it up any farther, here we go. So that is a pizza ready to make. Thin in the center, ring around the outside. Let's go on with some sauce. The rookie mistake with almost all pizza is putting too much stuff on. So go easy on your toppings. You can always add more on your next one, but I think you will be surprised by how good a pizza is with minimalist toppings. It lets the sauce and the dough, which is, you know, 2/3 of the pizza, really shine through rather than focusing on just too much of everything on the top. That is pizza ready to go for me. Got to do a little bit of this cheese. Again, minimalist, don't go nuts, but you know, certainly do enough to make yourself happy with it. And I can promise you it's probably more cheese than what you're getting in those frozen boxes. That is about what I want for cheese. A few of those onions I sliced earlier, they will cook very quickly where we're going with this. I think a few more there. A couple of the capers. This is just one of my weird little toppings that I discovered years ago, and I really like it. You get these little tiny bursts of vinegary, I don't know what else. How else do you describe a caper? That's enough on the capers. Whoa, sorry. And then a few of those sun-dried tomatoes. Again, minimalist. Every little bit is good. And hey, look, if you are a traditional pizza maker and it's pepperoni and mozzarella every single time, that's okay. The point is you're making it yourself. It's going to be that much better than the frozen boxes. All right, so that's ready to go. The whole point of doing this on the parchment is that now it's easy to move around. I can just get my peel under there, and the whole thing is going to go straight on top of my baking stone. Let's go outside to my secret weapon, the Kamado oven. Okay, we're outside on the Kamado grill. For those of you who don't know, it's basically an insulated grill. It's got double thick walls. You can get them for several $1,000s, or you can get a cheap one like this one for just a couple $100 at the superstore. We're at about $735, $740. I'd usually like to get up to around $800, but quite frankly, I'm running low on charcoal. So we've got the pizza here ready to go. The whole point of the parchment is that I can just do this and have no disasters getting it onto the grill. We're gonna let that go with the lid closed. Gonna give it about 1.5 to 2 minutes at that temperature. Then I'll be able to pull the parchment paper out to get a real solid crust on the bottom. Probably another 1.5 to 2 minutes on the back side of doing that. Total about 3-4 minutes, something along those lines. But again, if you got a little bit extra charcoal than I have today, you can get this thing cranked up to 850 and it'll cook in under 3 minutes. So gonna fast forward a little bit and see how that cooks. I should say that the stone you saw in there on the grates is one of these pottery kiln stones. Nice and thick, super cheap. You get them in any shape or size you want. Do find them locally because they're kind of heavy to ship, but lots cheaper than the gourmet store pizza stones. And there is that pizza, beautifully brown and golden, ready to go inside. We're going to show you off inside under the better lighting. So here is one beautiful and fast pizza straight from the oven. If you like a little bit darker crust, another 30 seconds or a minute, depending on the temperature of your oven, will do that. And of course, you can always do these inside on your regular home oven. And also, if you don't have the fancy food processor or any of the other equipment, you can do everything by hand. The dough you can do by hand easily. The sauce you can do in a food mill. The point is, it doesn't take that much time. If you look back at the timer, I think hands-on time, even though it was spread over 2 days, was less than 8 minutes. All you got to do is sit down on Sunday and say, hey, do I want pizza in the next 4 days? Take 2 minutes to do your dough, and then proceed on the night you want pizza. I do appreciate you watching, liking, thumbs up, and all that other crazy social media stuff. You can get all of these recipes up on my blog. Just click on that link up there and you'll find not only these recipes, but a few others. And of course, if you haven't, please do subscribe to the channel, because that's what lets me keep doing this for you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I am glad to do a quick pizza for you. Stop buying those frozen things. Oh, by the way, this pizza cost me $1.73 to make. Compare that to your frozen boxes, even on sale. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands. Now try not to eat the whole thing in one sitting. Cheers.